You're going to hear something that will shock you. Imagine standing in front of your entire family being laughed at, mocked, and humiliated by the one person who should have had your back. That happened to me, and it cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. I am 30 years old, and my own sister called me a loser in front of everyone at our family reunion. What she did not know was that everything was about to change, and what I did next would completely flip our lives forever. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments and tell me. My name is Lillian Maddox, and I am 30 years old. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and my sister Claire was always the favorite in the family. She was charming, outgoing, and somehow everyone listened to her. I was quieter, more cautious, and I focused on my work and building my life. I thought family gatherings would be safe, a place where I could relax and feel accepted. I was wrong. Everything changed the moment we arrived at our family reunion last summer. The moment I walked into the living room, I felt it. Claire's eyes met mine, and I knew something was coming. I tried to ignore it, thinking she would not do anything in front of our relatives. But I was wrong again. She stood in the center of the room, holding a glass of wine, and with a smirk on her face, she said, "Oh, look who decided to show up. You are still the same loser from high school, I see." The room went silent. Everyone stared at me. My face burned, and I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to explain that I had worked hard, that my life was not a joke, but the words would not come out. I was frozen. She laughed, and the sound echoed in the room. I realized in that moment that she wanted this. She wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. My stomach twisted with anger and shame. I felt small, invisible, and yet the humiliation was so loud it could not be ignored. For years I had avoided conflict, trying to keep peace and maintain a polite distance, but now I felt something shift inside me. Something dark, sharp, and powerful. I wanted to prove her wrong, not by arguing, but by showing her that she could never control my life. I could not let this moment define me. My mind raced. I thought about everything she had, her business, her influence, her charm, and I realized that everything she had could be mine, if I dared to take it. I made a decision in that second. I would not let her words or laughter break me. I would wait, plan, and act. And when the time came, I would turn this humiliation into the most incredible victory anyone could imagine. I left the reunion early, pretending to be calm, but my mind was alive with possibilities. That night, I began researching, making calls, and quietly preparing. She did not see me as a threat, and that was her mistake. Every step I took from that moment on was calculated, careful, and precise. By the end of the week, I had discovered an opportunity that would change everything. It was not about revenge in the ordinary sense. It was about reclaiming power, about showing that no insult, no public humiliation, no laughter could ever define who I am or what I am capable of achieving. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had never felt before. Claire had humiliated me, but I would not let her laughter echo forever. I poured a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, my mind racing with ideas. I started researching her business, her investments, her contacts, anything that could give me leverage. Claire owned a small but successful boutique clothing store in our town. She had poured years of effort into building it, but she had also made mistakes, left debts unpaid, and had ignored opportunities that I could seize. I wrote down everything I learned. Every detail mattered. I realized that the more I understood her world, the more power I could gain without anyone suspecting. I felt a sense of calm and determination wash over me. This was no longer about anger. It was about strategy. I made a list of priorities. First, I had to secure access to information that only she had. Next, I had to position myself as someone trustworthy, someone the banks and creditors would listen to. Lastly, I had to be patient. I could not rush. Impulsiveness was what she counted on. While Claire was careless and impulsive, I was methodical. I created a timeline, breaking every task into small, manageable steps. I spent hours on the phone, sending emails, and quietly building my network. No one suspected a thing. I smiled at colleagues and neighbors as if nothing had happened at the reunion, all the while gathering knowledge that would change everything. Every call I made, every email I sent, brought me closer to my goal. I kept imagining the moment when I would have the upper hand. It was not about hurting her physically or emotionally. It was about proving that intelligence, planning, and perseverance could triumph over arrogance and cruelty. By the end of the week, I had collected enough information to understand her entire financial situation. Debts, loans, missed payments, and opportunities for investment, all laid out clearly. I discovered a loan that was in default and realized that I could legally buy it, giving me indirect control over her business. My heart raced as I realized the magnitude of what I had uncovered. This was my chance. Not revenge in a petty sense, but a complete transformation of power. I felt like a different person. The fear and humiliation from the reunion had turned into fuel, and I knew that once I acted, nothing would ever be the same. I stayed up late that night, reviewing every document, every contract, every email. I visualized the future, imagining the look on her face when she realized I had quietly become her greatest competitor, her unstoppable force. For the first time in my life, I felt unstoppable. I went to bed knowing that my plan was ready, my mind sharp, and my patience infinite. Claire might have laughed at me publicly, but soon she would learn that appearances can be deceiving, and the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. The following week, I began putting my plan into motion. I contacted the bank that held the loan Claire had neglected, speaking calmly and professionally. I introduced myself as an investor interested in purchasing certain debts. I made sure to appear friendly, trustworthy, and completely neutral. No one suspected that I was Claire's sister or that I had been humiliated at a family event just days before. Every detail had to be perfect. As the conversation progressed, I realized that the bank was willing to negotiate. They wanted repayment, and I had the resources to step in. I calmly made an offer, one that was fair but placed me in a position of authority. By the end of the call, I had secured the loan. Legally, I now held leverage over Claire's boutique without her knowing a single detail. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. This was more than I had imagined. I felt a sense of control I had never experienced before. I knew the next steps were crucial. I had to maintain secrecy while preparing for the moment I would reveal the outcome. I continued gathering information, checking her business accounts, and quietly building influence. The beauty of my plan was that Claire had no idea. She continued her daily routines, laughing, talking to friends, and completely oblivious to the fact that I now had indirect control over her entire business. I watched from a distance, taking notes on her patterns, her habits, and the decisions she was making. Everything she did only strengthened my confidence that this plan would succeed. One evening, I visited the boutique under the pretext of shopping. I observed the staff, the inventory, and the day-to-day operations. I asked questions that seemed casual but were strategic, gathering more insight without raising suspicion. The thrill of this silent victory energized me. Every piece of information I collected made the final moment more satisfying. I imagined the look on her face when she finally realized that the quiet sister, the one she mocked publicly, had been the one quietly taking control all along. That image kept me focused. I reminded myself to stay patient. The power of waiting is incredible, and impatience can ruin even the most carefully crafted plans. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed: the legal documents, the leverage, and the perfect timing. I had transformed humiliation into a quiet but unstoppable force. The person who had mocked me, called me a loser, and embarrassed me in front of everyone had no idea that the tables were about to turn. Every step I took had been calculated to ensure maximum impact and zero suspicion. Soon, everything Claire thought she controlled would belong to me. The humiliation she had inflicted would pale in comparison to the shock of seeing the power I had gained quietly, methodically, and brilliantly. I could feel the anticipation building, the excitement rising, and the moment of revelation approaching. Nothing would ever be the same after this. The day I had been waiting for arrived. I walked into Claire's boutique, carrying myself with calm confidence, pretending to be just another customer. Inside, she was busy arranging displays and greeting shoppers. She smiled when she saw me, completely unaware of the storm that had been quietly building around her. I greeted her warmly, making small talk as I examined the items in the store. Every word I spoke was carefully measured. I asked questions that seemed casual but were part of my plan. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to believe that nothing had changed, while I held all the power silently. After a few minutes, I asked to speak privately. Claire looked surprised, but agreed. We walked to the office and I closed the door behind us. I took a deep breath, knowing this moment would define everything. I handed her a folder containing documents she had no idea existed. Her eyes widened as she began scanning them. I explained that I had purchased the loan tied to her business. Calmly, I outlined how this gave me legal leverage and control over certain financial decisions. Claire's expression shifted from confusion to shock. She tried to interrupt, to argue, but I maintained my composure. I reminded her that this was not about revenge, not about humiliation, but about consequences and responsibility. Every word I spoke was firm, measured, and undeniable. She realized that every careless decision she had made, every debt she had ignored, had brought her to this moment. I watched as the realization sank in. The sister who had mocked me, laughed at me, and publicly humiliated me was now powerless in this private office. Her charm, her arrogance, and her confidence had been dismantled silently, methodically, and without anyone else knowing. She asked me how I had managed this, and I smiled softly. I told her that patience, careful planning, and determination were far more powerful than arrogance or public attention. She could not believe that the quiet sister she dismissed had transformed into someone unstoppable. I gave her options, showing her that cooperation could lead to a positive outcome, while resistance would be difficult and stressful. The weight of responsibility now rested on her shoulders. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, but not cruelty. This was about justice, about reclaiming the dignity and confidence I had lost that day at the reunion. The look on her face was priceless, a mixture of shock, regret, and awe. I realized that the power I had gained was not just financial, it was emotional and mental. I had transformed humiliation into control, mockery into respect, and laughter into serious consideration. By the time I left her boutique that day, the world had shifted. Claire understood that nothing would ever be the same. The quiet sister who had been overlooked, dismissed, and mocked had emerged as the one holding the cards, calmly and confidently, ready for any challenge that life could present. The tables had turned completely. After that day in the boutique, everything changed. Claire treated me differently, cautiously, almost respectfully. The humiliation she had inflicted on me at the family reunion no longer had any power. I had transformed that moment of shame into the ultimate victory. I continued to manage my involvement quietly, making sure that every decision I made was strategic and fair. I did not want chaos or destruction. I wanted control, respect, and balance. Every phone call, every meeting, every interaction was deliberate. Claire began consulting me on decisions she had previously made alone. I guided her through financial choices, inventory decisions, and staffing concerns, all while maintaining professionalism and calm authority. It was remarkable to see the transformation in her attitude. She had underestimated me for years, but now she could not ignore the sister she mocked, the one she dismissed, the one she had laughed at in front of our entire family. I realized that power does not come from anger or force. It comes from patience, intelligence, and strategy. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and the results were undeniable. I felt a sense of pride and satisfaction that was deeper than any fleeting revenge. My confidence grew as I realized that I could handle challenges with composure and skill. Every step I had taken had been calculated, and now the pieces were falling perfectly into place. I had taken control without unnecessary drama, without exposing myself to ridicule, and without harming anyone. My victory was complete because it was quiet, precise, and unstoppable. At home, I reflected on how far I had come. The woman who had walked into that reunion feeling small, humiliated, and powerless had now become someone in control of her life, her dignity, and her environment. I had turned humiliation into opportunity, mockery into strength, and doubt into absolute certainty. I understood that this was more than just a personal triumph. It was a life lesson. No matter how others treat you, how publicly you are mocked, or how small you feel, you have the power to change your circumstances. All it takes is patience, focus, and the willingness to act strategically. The final moment came when Claire, fully aware of the new balance, thanked me quietly. She admitted that she had underestimated me and that my guidance had been invaluable. I smiled, knowing that the tables had turned completely. I did not gloat. I did not celebrate loudly. I simply acknowledged the truth. I had taken what was once a moment of extreme humiliation and converted it into the most powerful transformation of my life. The sister who mocked me, called me a loser, and humiliated me publicly could no longer wield any control over me. I had become unstoppable. I had proven that intelligence, patience, and determination can overcome arrogance, mockery, and public shame. My life was now full of confidence, clarity, and undeniable authority. I walked away from that boutique with a sense of accomplishment unlike anything I had ever experienced. I had rewritten my story, reclaimed my dignity, and shown that true power is quiet, deliberate, and unstoppable.